Post from deleted. What is your creepy unexplained childhood experience? Comment from PM me your poem. Laying in bed one night. It's pitch black apart from the light creeping under the door from the landing. My mum was actually with me in the same room as we had only just moved in, and she was sleeping on the floor. I look up and the door slowly creaks open, and slowly an oldish woman peers around the door, looks at me and goes away. I just thought I was in a nightmare and turned around real fast and went under the covers, hoping I would wake up. Then I will never forget my mum whispering to me, "Did you just see someone peer around the door?" Safe to say we didn't sleep a wink that night. Comment from Broship_Rajor. Not really creepy, but it bothers me still because WTF. Me and my friend were hitting each other with pillowcases. IDK, we swung at each other. Both hold tightly onto our cases. We hit each other simultaneously, and at the end of the swing we look at our hands and we're holding each other's cases. They just switched. Neither of us left like anything was ripped from our hands or that there was any exchange or anything. They were just suddenly swapped. I have no idea how it happened. It doesn't make any sense. If I could see a recording of anything in my life, it would be that moment. Comment from PM_me_for_smalltalk. My sister and I were having a prank war for like a week straight. Well, we agreed to a ceasefire since my birthday was in 2 days. I just turned 11, and later that night I hear my closet door open. Oh, so my sister wants to prank me on my special day. I'll show her, I thought. So I know she snuck in and forgot my door squeaks. So I had an idea. I would get up and push her. Ha 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 ha, I am a genius, kiddo. So I slowly get up and she steps out of the closet. Wasn't my sister, because my sister doesn't have long black hair and scars on her face and isn't as tall as a grown woman. I wanted to scream, but instead I just froze and silently started whimpering and crying. She puts her finger up to her lips and lets out a chish, and opens my window and crawls out. Slowly closed my window, never to be seen again. At first I thought it was a ghost. Now I'm convinced it was a crackhead or something. Comment from YOLOtheSwagnificant. When I was younger, no idea how old, I had a dream that my aunt came to visit me. I was named after her husband, who died a few months before I was born, so she always loved me. So after the dream I went into my parents' room and told them that Aunt Liz came to see me, and she told me to say goodbye. A few hours later they got a call that she had passed away. A few years later my grandfather's friend Mary got brain cancer and she lost her ability to speak and her face was paralyzed. The last time I saw her I told my mom I just wanted to see her smile one more time. A few nights later I had a dream where she was smiling at me. Few hours later, parents got a call that she had passed. When I was 11 to 12 I had a dream my dad died. He was shitting bricks for weeks. 14 years later he's still alive though. Comment from wjescott. I grew up dirt poor in western South Dakota. The county I lived in was larger than Delaware, with a population of about 30,000 people. When I was bored, which was frequently, I'd go to the library in town, population 530. I'd pick a random book and start reading. One of the books I read was a history of the area, and one of the stories dealt with my stepfather's father's step-grandpa property, in that his father, step-great-grandpa, had annexed some property in the 30s. During the Dust Bowl, my grandmother was kind of well off, but easily the most evil person I've ever met. I asked her about my late step-great-grandfather's annexation about a week or two later. The Millers was how she answered. No other explanation. It took me asking aunts and uncles. But the story went that during one of the particularly horrid dust storms, a family called the Millers had abandoned their property, just left the place, and went to greener pastures in California. I asked around to where the property used to be. They mentioned it was on the southeast side of the property, by some mini badlands areas we called breaks. When I asked if the house and everything was still there, they said no, and that it was a waste of time. I was a curious little shit though, and my favorite topics were history and archaeology. So one afternoon, I went to where I thought they were talking about. A bit of a rise in the middle of otherwise completely uninteresting plains. Nothing. A couple of more weeks went by. I was probably 11 or 12. I forget. I went on a ride down that way again, dirt bike, not horse, and found myself in a sort of V between some breaks. I saw what I thought was a weird pyramid of some sort, and went to check it out. What it ended up being was the angle of a roof, sticking out of the ground. I went around to the far side of it, and saw an attic vent. Being more curious than cautious, I pulled the framing around the vent and opened it. There was a bunch of blown dirt around, but otherwise the area was mostly intact. Not much in it, but it was an unfinished attic with one of those old school ladders halfway down, and a couple of holes going down to the rooms underneath. I glanced into one. When my eyes adjusted to the light, I'm fairly sure I saw something lying on the floor. I can't tell you what it was, because I was out of there so fucking fast I outran photons. I rode back to Grandma's house, but there was no way on the planet I was telling that woman I went to the place. So I waited for a week and told my cousin Brad. Brad is slightly more intelligent than a piece of driftwood. He called bullshit and wanted to see. I was having none of this, but told him I'd take him there anyway, as I wasn't chicken. We got to where I was, where I fucking well know I was, but there wasn't a house, wasn't a roof. There were dirt bike tracks, there were footprints, but it looked like I'd just walked around for a while in the alkali dirt. Brad gave me shit about it, went down and told my other cousins that I'd bullshitted him. Blah blah blah. Even a couple of my aunts found out and gave me shit. I swear that shit happened. There's been a whole lot of my life that I've added a few adjectives, adverbs to make more interesting. But, bullshit aside, that happened just the way I've typed it. Still fucks with me to this day. Comment from rudewa. When I was a kid, I remember waking up in this room with my mom holding me down and this older Somali lady. And I remember that I was screaming and crying the whole time, and I remember peeing blood the days after that memory and being in pain. But that's all I remember. My mom said that it never happened, but I know something did. I lived in Kenya and my mom was always gung-ho about FGM, but my dad refused to go along with it. Also the fact that I have little to no memories of my life before the age of 14. Comment from Mrhegel. When I was younger I used to think I was having dreams of an old woman in a blue dress and cat-eye glasses sitting at the end of my bed singing to me. She'd always sing the same song and then leave. One night I followed her into my brother's room. He is younger than me and was around 5. Instead of singing to him, he woke up and they began talking. After like 20 minutes my mother came in and asked what we were doing. My brother said, "I'm just talking to the lady in the blue dress." She made us go back to bed. I woke up still thinking it was a dream. My mom told me the next morning she didn't want me sneaking out of bed anymore in the middle of the night to play with my brother. I asked her what she was talking about and she gave me her version of what she saw the night before. To this day I believe that was real and that every night that old woman would sing to me. I get goosebumps just thinking about it. She stopped singing to me soon after that, though people in my family still caught my brother speaking to nothing on numerous occasions. A while later an aunt came to visit from down south and refused to come into our house after seeing an old woman in cat glasses standing in the upstairs window. She came in asking who was upstairs, then freaked out when my mother told her no one and let her search the house. Comment from Ashybuttons. I remember almost nothing before the age of 12, and that's kind of creepy on its own. Comment from VeryRoomy. When I was around 7 I was lying down on my bed with a recorder in hand. Then my hand with the recorder suddenly closed in and the recorder was gone. Never found it again. RIP recorder. Comment from go_habs_go31. When I was around 8 or 9, my family and my parents' friends, along with their kids, had a picnic at a park. My friend John and I were running around as kids do, playing tag. He was older, around 11 at the time. At one point we got separated. I was clearly lost in the park and I couldn't find my friend, much less my parents. That's when a woman approached me. She was rather tall, had long curly black hair, was fair-skinned, and wore thick-rimmed glasses. She must have been in her mid-30s. She looked very much like any number of my parents' friends. Initially, this woman simply asked me if I was lost. I nodded sheepishly. She then held out her hand and said that she could take me back to my mom. I told her, "It's okay. My friend John will find me." She then asked, "Don't you remember me? I'm a friend of your mother's. Come. I'll take you to her." Again, I repeated that, "It's okay. I know my friend John will come find me." That's when she said creepiest words a stranger had ever told me. "Did you know that you have the most beautiful eyes?" Even to an 8 or 9-year-old. I knew this wasn't normal behavior. Sure, I was a really cute kid with big brown eyes and jet black hair. But I knew that's simply not something a stranger who literally approached me a few minutes prior. Should be saying, just as she reached out her hand and told me that we could go find my mom together. My friend John suddenly appeared out of nowhere. He looked winded. "Where did you go?" he asked. She looked a little flustered. "Who's this?" he asked. "Kids that age are pretty straight to the point." "I'm a friend of his mother's," she replied, smiling. "Come. Let's go find her," she repeated. "Sorry. We're playing tag." "Gotta go," said John. He yanked me by the wrist and we ran off together. Flash forward to a month or so later. I'm going to mall with my mom one afternoon. As we're walking, I suddenly noticed the same woman from the park walking towards us. The same long, curly black hair, fair skin, and thick-rimmed glasses. My mother would always stop and talk if she noticed a friend passing by. And yet, this same woman, who's clearly walking towards us, who's obviously within my mom's eyesight, this same woman who kept insisting that she was a friend of my mother's and that we should go find her. Why, it seems like she's a complete stranger to my mother. And as this woman kept approaching and walking towards us, I remember everything in slow motion. She noticed me noticing her. She recognized the fact that I instantly recognized her. And at the very precise moment when we walked right past each other, I looked up, and she looked down at me with the most devilish smile on her face. Comment from Malgana. Not really unexplained, but it's the best I've got. I was walking around in the pitch dark one night because I couldn't sleep and decided to watch TV in my living room. As I was trying to find the lamp switch, I suddenly heard a weird noise from across the room. I remember thinking to myself, what the hell is in the room that could make that noise, because I had no idea how to describe to myself what my ears had just heard. My mind rushed through all the objects that were in the living room that make noise, but I still couldn't piece it together. I sat there for like 5 minutes before my fear subsided enough that I could move without feeling like I would be immediately eviscerated by some demon in the darkness. Turned on my TV and looked around, but couldn't find anything out of the ordinary. A few days later, I'm walking around the house and I hear it again. I walk out to the living room and I see a fine mist in the sunlight falling from the top shelf of the bookcase. I finally put one and one together and realized it was a fucking Febreze spritzer with a timer that lets out a spray every 12 hours. Which my mom had bought just the day before. I had spent 5 minutes in sheer terror. Sure, I was about to die. Over Febreze. Comment from YOUSHOUTEDTHIS. My family was very religious when I was growing up. One time we were in church and they'd asked a few members to go to the front so they could pray for someone specific to a small wooden railing. Like a church pew with no seat. So my aunt had gone to the front and brought 5-year-old me with her. We closed our eyes and started singing and lifted our hands in prayer Pentecostal, and after about a minute I felt someone's hands touch mine. Like flat against mine. I swayed my hands slowly from side to side as I'd seen the adults do. And the person touching my hands followed along as normal. I thought it was the pastor's wife, who liked me and in general really liked all the children of the church. I was so happy she'd chosen to pray with me that after a few minutes I decided to break prayer protocol and open my eyes to smile at her. But quickly realized it wasn't her. It wasn't anyone. I looked from side to side to see if maybe the person had moved on to pray with someone else. But everyone else was doing their own thing. There was no one else there. But I distinctly felt someone's hands touching mine. I know I wasn't mistaken. I mean, you would be able to tell if someone placed their hand in yours. Right. I don't know if this qualifies as creepy, but for me it's still unexplained. Comment from deleted. When I was in preschool, my parents put my brother and me in a posh school. We live in South America, where the majority of the population is brown, but in that school, since it was for rich kids, it was mostly white kids. I'm quite brown. My brother is white. I got bullied a lot there by my classmates. The only kid who didn't bully me at all was this Christian boy named Christian. He was really blonde with curly hair and pink cheeks. He looked like a cherub. Somehow he got bullied too. I think because of his accent. His parents were American or something. Not locals for sure. Anyway, one day at recess we were playing and this big bully from our class came to pick on us. Christian was up in the slide and the bully somehow pushed him to the floor and started pinching him while Christian asked him to stop. I remember very clearly the bully was pinching Christian's shoulder. After recess we had to go to a dance rehearsal and Christian spent the entire time complaining about how much his shoulder hurt. Next day he didn't show up. Nor did the next weeks. Last time we all saw him was when his dad brought him to the class, telling us he had to go back home, and they were smiling and seemed cheery, but guess what? Christian was missing an arm. He had nothing below the shoulder. The same shoulder the bully had pinched. His dad explained to us, smiling like a catalog model the entire time, that Christian had had an accident and had to get his arm amputated. I turned around to see the bully's reaction, and he seemed as shocked as anybody else. It really messed up with me, and I became very afraid of bullies and didn't let anyone touch my shoulders until a few years ago. I know it's irrational to think a simple pinching from a 5-year-old can do so much damage, but this couldn't be a coincidence. Comment from the answering machine. It is not much, but I once made a ball go down a slide. I saw the ball go trough the slide. I don't know why. I don't know how, but it is my definition of a glitch in the matrix for me. The thing is, either this really happened and it is plain weird, or I have a false memory that is clear as crystal, which scare me a bit. I mean, that such memories can exist. Comment from Bathysphere 710. When I was a kid, my dad would take us to a giant lake, with a big sandy shore, like a landlocked beach for hillbillies. I was waiting in the shallow end, when I felt something brush through my fingers. Being 7, and wishing it was a real beach, I thought, maybe these are sea plants. Then realized that was stupid. As I squeezed the tendrils that were brushing my hand, they squished and sunk, and I felt bones through the soft, squishy mass, finger bones, like I was holding the hand of a child my age. I got out of the water, sat on the shore, and told no one. Year later, my sister said she thought a boy had been kicking her under the water. But when she grabbed at the foot, it felt cold and squishy, and she also told no one. Comment from deleted. I've had this bizarre memory from my childhood. I was 4 when this happened, about 1989. I remember being locked in an empty bedroom in this house. No bed, no curtains, no nothing. And I know I was there for a long time. Over 2 days. I recall peeing in the empty closet, and I remember being scared when it got dark and the room being partially illuminated by the orange light of a street lamp. Street lamp light still creeps me out. I had a box of crayons but no coloring book. I ended up melting the crayons on the radiator that ran beneath the window. The smell of melted crayon and pee is a detail that I'll never forget. I remember that I was too short to look out the window, even standing on the radiator. I spent all my life in foster homes until I was 14, so it's hard to remember where I was supposed to be. Some other details that are less clear. There was a black woman in a beige trench coat, and maybe she left me there. I'm white. If that makes any difference. Though I don't recall who came and got me. I have the vaguest recollection of sitting with a woman in some kind of lounge that had a small deli. It may have been the lobby of a large auditorium. I was eating a tuna fish sandwich. I remember we were waiting for something. I recall fiddling with a metal box on the wall, the kind with those pull-tab games that bars have. There was a cab at one point, and that's all I remember. One last thing, and this one is to me the weirdest. I was living in Tacoma, USA in 2002, and I used to take walks down to the waterfront daily. On those walks I always passed a house that gave me intense creepy vibes, and I am 87.5% certain that this was the house I was locked in. I am not psychic or even that intuitive, so I think that I remembered it. My theory is that the black woman was at one point my caseworker, and she just left me in this empty house so she didn't have to fuss with me. In any event, it left a faint but eerie scar that will always be there. At least until I get old and forget everything. My best friend once told me that it sounds like I was part of a state-sponsored experiment that focused on isolation or something like that. I don't believe that at all. But it sounds creepy. Anyway, that's my story. It's not even that interesting, but it creeps me out, so I thought I'd share. Comment from MagicSPA. One time when I was 12, I was out playing with friends on the opposite end of the estate from my house. My mother was out with my brother somewhere, and my dad was out with my sister, and I was having a great time on a sunny day with my buddies. Suddenly, and inexplicably, I felt a strong compulsion to go home. My house was 3/4 of a mile away, an inconvenient distance for a 12-year-old who is in the middle of something else. The reason for this compulsion was because I just knew that our new dog, a stray that we'd taken in, had started to chew the linoleum in the kitchen, and I had to stop her. I quickly left my friends. I would love to be able to remember what explanation I gave them, and cycled home as fast as I could. I let myself in and, true enough, the dog had just started to chew the linoleum in the kitchen. I stopped her, took her out, gave her some food, and stayed in with her for the rest of the day. I always remember that day, because it was so vivid, and so unexpected, and so random. Why would some mystical force care whether or not the dog had chewed the linoleum? Well, whatever it was, I'm glad it called upon me. After my parents divorced me, my siblings, and my mom ended up living broke in a bad part of town. That dog saw us through some rough times. It was a companion, a prowler alarm, a home entertainment system, and a source of constant comfort when we had nothing to our name. I literally cannot imagine repeating those years without the dog there. I learned recently that linoleum is not inert. It contains powerful toxins which, if ingested, can cause cancer, and it can also fatally block a dog's digestive tract. If I hadn't intervened, the dog would likely have died sooner than it did. Possibly within days, because my posturing hard case of a father would have happily been seen to put the dog down rather than shell out for an expensive operation. TLDR. I was the closest family member to a minor incident that could have killed my old dog. Some spooky force saved its ass for greater things. God bless you. Minnie. Comment from KingBevins. On a family trip I was reading a magazine. When we got to the hotel I slid the magazine between the cushions and thought, so the robbers won't get it. Then I questioned why I thought robbers would see it. Then continued on. Our car got broken into that night. Magazine stayed. Comment from Felicity_badporn. When I was very young I had very vivid memories and nightmares of what I now know to be the Vietnam War. They stopped by the time I was 8. Comment from powergohan. Back in the 90s, before we even had a computer to use the internet, my sister and I had a Super Nintendo and a bunch of friends came over at night to play Donkey Kong. One of our friends knew the secret code you input on the start menu to get 99 lives. Our friend gloated over us that he wouldn't tell us the code. The next morning, my sister wakes up and is so excited. I remember this because I was awake already. She immediately turns on the game and enters the code, and voila, the code works. She said she had a dream where Donkey Kong told her the code. Not so much creepy as it is kinda awesome. Comment from Lupert17. I grew up in a upper middle class suburb. My house was on the main subdivision street. It was the summer, and being 14, me and some friends were playing basketball in driveway. It was turns to about 7 or 8 and gets dark, so we just chill in garage and are playing cards or something. The garage is open and the neighborhood is quiet, until we see someone walking slowly down my street. They're walking in middle of the road, not on the sidewalks, dressed in all white. Person was male, light skinned. I mean all white, white button down, white linen pants, white shoes. Just keeps slowly walking by and doesn't acknowledge us. He finally stops at my mailbox, and just stands there, turning and looking down at road. Still never looked at us. We call out to him, but he doesn't budge, still looking down at the street. Out of nowhere an older white car, seemed like an old Cadillac, pulls up. The stranger gets in. The car had 3 other passengers, all dressed the same from what I could see, all white shirts. Then the Cadillac drives off. My friends and I all remember this, and thought it was incredibly creepy then and now. This was about 16 years ago. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe.